In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a WordPress website with a domain name and auto-renewing SSL certificate on Amazon Web Services EC2 instance. And this will actually be free for the first 12 months if you are a new Amazon Web Services user. So let's go ahead and get on into the tutorial. Okay, so we're going to go to aws.amazon.com/free. And in here, you will see that there are some filters by tier type, and one of them is 12 months free. So let's click on that, and you'll see that Amazon EC2 is one of those that are part of that category, and you get 750 hours per month for free. So do the math, how many hours are in a month? It's less than 750, so that is essentially free for your first 12 months as an Amazon Web Services user. So if you don't have an account, go ahead and create one. We can get started with Amazon EC2. I do have my account, so I'm going to log right into the dashboard here. I'm going to get started by launching my EC2 instance. Now, you'll see here that there are some icons next to some of these that say free tier eligible, free tier eligible. What we want to do specifically is use an Ubuntu operating system, and lucky for us that Ubuntu Server 20.04 is also free tier eligible. So let's select that for our image. For the instance type, we want this one right here, free tier eligible T2 micro, which gives us 1 virtual CPU, 1 gigabyte of memory. So keep that one selected by default. We'll go to next. Everything here, feel free to change it if you know what you're doing, but we're going to keep the defaults. So click next. And then here with Amazon, as it says here, the free tier, you get up to 30 gigabytes of general purpose SSD. So the default is 8, but you can bump that up to 30 if you would like. So we will do that and click next. And here, no need to add tags, so we'll click next. And then for ports, so by default, they allow the SSH port, which is port 22. This is kind of neat. So you can allow SSH from anywhere or your specific IP address. So I'm only going to allow SSH from my current IP address. I'm also going to open up the HTTP port, and that's going to be allowed from anywhere. And I'm going to open up the HTTPS port, which is, am I missing something? Oh, there it is. HTTPS, and that one is also going to be allowed from anywhere. All right, so we will review and launch. This is just a basic overview of what we have already configured. This looks good to me, so let's click on launch. As far as logging in via SSH, they recommend that you create a key pair. So I'm going to create a new key pair so we can go through that process together. And I'm just going to call this, let's call it AWS EC2. And I'll download that key pair, and we'll use this in just a bit to connect to our server via SSH. So let's go ahead and launch that instance. So on this next page, you'll see that it says your instances are now launching. Down here in the bottom right, let's click on View Instances. We can maybe see the progress along the way, and it doesn't indicate that it is up and running yet, so let's give it a little bit more time. Okay, you can see now that the instance is up and running by this text right here, and you'll also see that we have a public IP address. Now, in the beginning, I told you that we're going to be working with a domain name. We're going to install an SSL certificate and all that. So I'm assuming that you have a domain name with a domain registrar somewhere. The steps that we're going to go through next are going to be similar, but the layout's going to be different depending on who you use to buy your domain name. But basically, all we want to do is add a DNS record to your website registrar that's going to point to this IP address or the IP address that you have on your screen. So I'm gonna copy it. It's the same thing down here. I'm gonna copy this public IP address, and I got my domain name from Google Domains. My domain name is netwits.io. So I'm gonna find the DNS settings for this domain. I'm gonna add 2 records, 2A records. Okay. The first one is just going to be the domain name itself, netwits.io, and that's going to point to the IP address. And then I'm going to add another record for www.netwits.io. That is also going to be an A record pointing to the same IP address. So we'll save those custom records, and it says it could take time to propagate. So that's why we want to do this as soon as possible to allow for the DNS settings to be applied across the internet. All right, so let's minimize that, and let's connect to our instance. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this. If you're on Windows, you can use the command line. If you're on Mac or Linux, you can use terminal. Or if you're on an older version of Windows, you can use PuTTY to connect to your server via SSH. Now, I'm going to use terminal on my Mac computer to connect to it. And if you remember, we downloaded that key in the beginning, and that's in my downloads directory. And I called that AWS EC2. So that is in this current directory. And in order to connect, what I'm going to do is do SSH-I I called it AW2 EC2, not AWS. No worries though. SSH-I, the name of your key file, and then the user for this instance is going to be Ubuntu at your IP address. So there's my IP address, and this is actually going to fail, and I'll tell you why in a second. This is the first time connecting, yes, and it says this private key will be ignored. It is required that your private key files are not accessible by other users. So basically, all we have to do is change the permissions with chmod for the key to 400. And you can do something like this. Whoops. So chmod 400, the name of your key file, right? So execute that. That's going to change the permissions to something that is acceptable for the SSH. And now we can try that again. So same thing, SSH-I, the key file, and then the user at the IP address. Hit enter. And that will log us into this server. So this is now a remote session on the server. It is a text-based terminal session. And what we want to do, which is always good practice, is to update and upgrade the system. So let's start out with that. Sudo apt update. And that'll take a bit. And when that's finished, we can do sudo apt upgrade. Hit enter. And this will download 57 megabytes and install 215. So that looks good to me. Type Y, hit enter, and we will also fast forward through this. All right, now that our server is up to date, we want to install all the packages necessary to make our website work, and that is something that is called LEMP, L-E-M-P, Linux, Nginx, MySQL, PHP, and that is a server stack that allows you to run websites or web applications on top of it. So let's install those packages. That's going to look something like this: sudo apt install Nginx, Maria database server, which is your MySQL server, PHP FPM, and PHP MySQL. So hit enter, and that's going to install not only those but some dependencies as well. That will be 200 megabytes of additional disk space. So do you want to continue? Type Y, hit enter. And as always, we'll fast forward through this. Okay, now that we have those packages installed, let's install WordPress. And we're going to install WordPress in the var www directory. And by default, this is where you have, actually, let me just show you. Inside the HTML directory, you have a basic index.html landing page for Nginx. And actually, if you go to your website right now in a web browser, either via the IP address or your domain name, I'll go to netwits.io, you should see that landing page. And we don't see that just yet because probably the DNS propagation hasn't finished. But if we go to the IP address, we should see that landing page. So let's try that. And we do. So welcome to Nginx. And just to prove to you that we're looking at the same exact thing, if we modify this index.html file, instead of saying, welcome to Nginx, oops, I'm editing a read-only file. Let me use the sudo privileges to be able to modify that. instead of saying welcome to Nginx, we can say something like Tony teaches tech. And we'll save that, simply come back over here, refresh the page, and that will update accordingly. So that is the root of your HTML directory, but we're going to make another directory next to HTML called WordPress, and that's where our WordPress installation will live. So let's go up a level. In here, we will use the wget command to download the WordPress archive. So and I'll actually have to do sudo wget https://wordpress.org/latest.tar.gz, and that's it's essentially doing what you think it does. It's going to download the file at this URL to our local file system. So let's execute that. And now we have that archive file on our system, and we will expand it with sudo tar-xzvf latest.tar.gz, and that's going to expand into the WordPress directory. Now we're done with this archive file, so we can remove that with rm latest.tar.gz. And I don't think that's going to allow us. We have to do sudo rm latest.tar.gz, and now that file is gone. So if we look at, if we do an ls-la, we'll see that nobody owns the WordPress directory and no group owns it either. We can fix that, and we can associate it with our web server by doing something like this: sudo chown for change ownerships, and we're going to do that recursively, and we're going to assign it to the www data user and the www data, not date, data group, and we're going to apply that to the WordPress directory and everything under it. So we'll execute that, and then we can double check that the www data group and user now own that, and that'll help the web server play well with the files on the file system. Similarly, for permissions, which are indicated over here on the left-hand side, WordPress recommends that you, for all directories, they want you to have a permissions of 755. So we'll execute that. And for all files, okay, type F for files, they recommend a permission of 644. So we'll again execute that recursively under the WordPress directory. So if we, when that's finished, if we go into the WordPress directory, we can do an ls-la and see all those files with the appropriate permissions and the appropriate user and the appropriate group. Okay, let's go ahead and take care of the database next. So we want to pretty much create an empty database that we're going to later on in this tutorial tell WordPress to use to store all of its information. So let's do that with, and actually before we create those database tables, let's secure the installation. And we can do that with MySQL_secure installation. And this is going to allow you to set a password for your root user for your MySQL database. So we don't have a password right now for root, so we'll hit enter, but we can set a password with, and I just saw that, yeah, we should run this as sudo as well. Sorry about that, guys. Do sudo MySQL secure installation. So we don't have a password, but we're going to set one. So type Y, hit enter, and then you can type in your new secure password and confirm it. And then these next few steps, do you want to remove anonymous users? Yes. Disallow root login remotely? Yes. Remove test database and access to it? Yes. Reload privilege tables now? Yes. Okay, so now that we have secured our MySQL database a little bit, we can log in with MySQL-U for user root, and then -p, and that will have to be prefixed with sudo as well. And that's going to prompt you for the password that you just created, so go ahead and type that in. And now you are on the MySQL command prompt. We're going to do a couple things in here. We are going to create a database, and the database is going to be called example database, and it's going to have the default character set UTF-8 with collate UTF-8 underscore Unicode underscore CI, which is again something that WordPress recommends for its MySQL databases. We are also going to create a user, and the user's name is going to be example user, and his password is going to be example underscore password. I recommend that you change these to something that is more appropriate for your setup and something that's more secure for a password. And then as far as privileges are concerned, we will grant all privileges on this database associated with all tables to this user. So this user is going to have the necessary privileges associated with this database. Last thing we'll do in here is we will apply those privileges with flush privilege command, flush privileges, semicolon, hit enter, and we are done in here so we can get out of the MySQL command prompt. Now the next thing we want to look at is the web server. So our web server in this case is going to be Nginx. So let's go into the etc Nginx directory. In here you have the base install for that. Our configuration files are located under sites available. You'll see that there's a sites available and a sites enabled directory, not that one. This one, sites enabled, sites available. We're going to create a file in sites available for our website, and then we're going to symlink it to sites enabled. And basically Nginx is going to look in here, and any configuration file that exists in here, it will make live, make public, all that good stuff. So let's go into the sites available directory, and we're going to make a file in here called WordPress.conf. And I'm going to use the Vim text editor. Feel free to use whatever text editor you're most comfortable with. Another one is Nano, N-A-N-O. But I will try to do my best to help you along with some of the commands that you need to know in order to use Vim. So let's make this this file. To edit the file, type I, and you'll see that you are now in insert mode. And I'm actually going to paste in this block of code, which I will have down below for you if you want to copy and paste it as well. And this is basically the configuration that we need to tell the Nginx web server about our website. So we're going to be listening on port 80, which is the HTTP port. Our server name is the domain name in the www version of your domain. Our root, just like we were working in before, is at var www WordPress, and then our index file is at is called index.php, and this file does exist in this directory. So we have two location blocks, one for PHP files and one for non-PHP files. So we are basically this FPM handler is referencing this upstream up here, and that is looking at a socket for PHP version 7.4 at this location. So I just want to make sure that this exists on your system. You might be running PHP version 7.3 or PHP version 8.0. So just make sure that you are using the same PHP version that you have installed. So otherwise, make the changes necessary for your configuration. And then to apply those changes, hit escape, shift, WQ to save the file, to write the file and quit out. Hit enter. And like I said, let's make sure that that PHP FPM file exists at var run PHP, and it does. So we're good to go there. Now, like I said, let's create a symbolic link from the sites available directory, this file, to the sites enabled directory. And we can do that with this command right here. So sudo ln-s from etc nginx sites available, the WordPress file, to etc nginx sites enabled. Now that we've done that, let's make sure that we haven't made any syntax errors or mistakes in our configuration file, and we can test that out with nginx-t. And make sure we do that with sudo. Okay, so syntax is okay, test is successful. That tells me that we can restart the Nginx server with sudo systemctl restart Nginx. All right, now we can go back to our web browser, and hopefully our DNS propagation has finished. Let's actually check that out. Let's go to dnschecker.org and type in your domain name. So mine's netwits.io. We want to look at the A records and just see what the IP address is associated with that. And we have 18.219.248.184. Does that match up with our instance IP address? And it does. So that means our DNS propagation has finished, and we should be able to go to our domain name in a web browser. So let's go to netwits.io. And I'm going to say that this is a browser caching issue. So what I'm going to do is get out of here, and I'm going to open up a guest window and try to go to netwits.io. And there we go. So it does load this time. If you run into something like that, either use a different browser or open up an incognito window or a guest window like I have done here. Okay, so let's go through the WordPress install. So we want English. We will click continue. It's going to ask us for the database credentials that we created earlier. This is where we're going to link our database to WordPress. So the database name, let me see what I said. It was example database. The username was example user. The password was example _PW. And then the database host was localhost because it's running on this the server that you're working on. And the table prefix can be WP_ or whatever you would like it to be. So let's see if that works. Let's go ahead and submit those changes. And it says, all right, Sparky, you've made it through the part of this part of the installation. WordPress can now communicate with your database. So let's go ahead and run the installation. This is where you can personalize your website. So I'm going to call my website Netwits. I'm going to give it a username of Tony Teaches Tech. And I'll use their suggested strong password and save that off over here. And I'm going to give them an email address, tonyteachestech@gmail.com. And that's my admin email address. So we'll click on Install WordPress and go ahead and log in. And we'll use those credentials that we just created. So Tony Teaches Tech and then the password. Go ahead and log in. And this is your WordPress admin dashboard. We are running at netwits.io and we're at the URL wp-admin. If we go to our site, you'll see that's being served at netwits.io. And if you want to go back to the dashboard, we can go to here, click dashboard, or you can simply type /wp-admin. Now, one thing that I like to do, I'm not going to go through all this. I have other videos about how to customize WordPress, which I'll link at the end of the video. But one thing I like to do after a fresh install of WordPress is to go into the site health section and see if there's any issues. And there is an issue in this case. And we are missing a whole bunch of optional modules for PHP. Now, we can easily install those back on the command line with a command that looks like this. So sudo apt install php curl, php dom, mbstring, imagemagick, zip, and gd, and that corresponds with all of these modules that WordPress is complaining about. So let's go ahead and install those. And we'll say yes to continue, hit enter, and we will let that install. Okay, that has finished. So let's go back into WordPress to see if those critical issues go away. So we refresh the page and they do. We don't have any critical issues, but it does say we should probably use HTTPS. So let's do that next. Let's install an SSL certificate on our website because right now it is not secure. So let's do that. And we're going to do that with something called certbot. Certbot is going to ask Let's Encrypt, who is a certificate authority, to issue us a SSL certificate. And the way it's going to do that is by reading the Nginx configuration file that we created earlier. So first we have to install a package manager, and then we'll install certbot, and then we'll get the certificate. So a couple steps, but it'll be worth it because the certificate will automatically renew for you, and hopefully you won't have to worry about SSL certificates in the future after this. So what we're going to do is type in sudo snap install core and sudo snap refresh core, hit enter, and that's going to go ahead and download snap for us. Okay, and after that you want to do sudo snap install -- classic certbot. So execute that. And then finally we want to create a symbolic link from snap bin certbot to user bin certbot. So execute that, and we should be good to go. So now let's tell certbot to issue us an SSL certificate, and we can do that with sudo certbot -- nginx. And if for another reason you're on an Apache web server, you can replace that with Apache. But we're using Nginx, and like I said, this is going to read our Nginx configuration file and issue a certificate based on that. So we will execute that, type in our email address, and do you agree with the terms and service? Type Y, hit enter. Do you want to receive additional emails? I'm going to say no, hit enter. And based on our configuration file for Nginx, it has detected our domain name is netwits.io and www.netwits.io. It says here, leave blank to select all options shown. So I'm just going to hit enter to get an SSL for both of those. So it's requesting a certificate for netwits.io and www.netwits.io right now. So that's going to do its thing. And it says it's deploying the certificate, and there we go. So we have our actual certificate lives at this location on our file system, and then the key associated with that is at this location. So what has just happened is if we look in at our WordPress configuration file, certbot actually came in here and made some modifications to it. So if you remember before we just had this part, and then down below certbot had it a listen 443 down here, which is the HTTPS port, and there is the location of our certificate and the key, and it's including some other necessary configurations. And then down here at the bottom, this is the logic that it added to redirect. If somebody goes to www.netwits.io, they're going to be redirected to HTTPS without the www. And if somebody goes to, a non-secure version of the website, explicitly HTTP:// they're going to be redirected to the secure version without www. So that was all automatically taken care of for us. And something else that is automatically taken care of for us is the automatic renewal of the SSL certificate. So let me show you how to verify that that is actually the case. So if you do something like systemctl list timers, and I'm going to have to make this window a little bit bigger. So let's try that again. Systemctl list timers. You'll see that one of the timers is snap certbot renew timer. I'm going to actually have to make this even bigger. And then there's also a service associated with that called snap certbot renew service. And that's going to execute, I think, a couple times a day. It's going to execute next in 20 minutes to check to see if a certificate renewal is necessary. And if it is, it's going to automatically do that for you. So I just want to make you guys aware of that. Now, one last thing I want you to do now that we do have an SSL certificate. Well, actually, let me show you that we do. So if you go to our website now, you'll see that it'll turn from non-secure to the padlock, and it says connection is secure, and we can look at the certificate here. Under details, you'll see that this is indeed a Let's Encrypt certificate, and it will expire in 3 months, but much before that, I think up to a month before that, that timer that we just looked at will automatically install a new version and put you out another 3 months. So I want to make you aware of that. And I also want to demonstrate that if somebody goes to www.yourwebsite, they'll be redirected to just your website. And if somebody goes to http:// your website, they will be redirected to the secure version. Now, like I was saying, the one last thing I want to make sure you do is to come into your WordPress admin dashboard. We'll have to log in again, so let me do that. And in your WordPress admin dashboard, go to Settings, General. And I want to make sure that you have your WordPress address and site address updated with HTTPS for both of those. So we'll go ahead and save those changes, and I think it'll kick us out one last time. So we'll log back in, and we should be good to go. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the steps of customizing or configuring WordPress. We'll save that for another video, which I actually have the perfect video for you, 15 important things to do after installing WordPress. Recommend that you check that out. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you over there.